Welcome. I'm joined by my work colleague, Ani Paitjan, who has just returned from Karabakh after covering the war. Ani, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So you and the team spent 9 days in Nagorno Karabakh, and you were on the ground in Stepanakert, in Martuni, Hadrut, Shushi, working on the shell fire around inhabitants who had lost their homes, with relatives fighting on the front. Can you speak a bit on this and how you worked in these conditions, as well as especially I'd like to ask about the inhabitants and your interactions with them?
So we came on September 30 in Stepanakert. So at first, the inhabitants were pretty motivated, and the mood was, they were worried about the situation, but they were still pretty motivated, and they were telling that we're gonna win. So we were, I think, not completely aware of what was going to happen, since none of us really saw that kind of war, that kind of situation, and so we were. I don't think we were that cautious as journalists, so we had access to absolutely everything as journalists. We were covering what was happening in Stepanakert, the bombings, the shell fires that were happening. It was still okay. We were going in the shelters, or we were trying to hide where we could. But we were going out to cover the events, cover what just happened. We also went out, as you said, in various villages to see what is happening. The second day we were in Martuni, as you know, I guess, and when the Le Monde journalists were there too and were injured, we were at the same moment there, but we were lucky enough to not be in the same area, but more on
the outskirts.
The village's outskirts, but closer to the border, actually. This is what saved us, because it's just, I would describe this way, it's just a matter of luck. If you're lucky enough, you won't be under those shell fires. If you're not lucky, you might be injured or dead. This is how we were actually working, hoping that nothing would happen to us. For the inhabitants, at first there was a huge solidarity between people. So the soldiers, everyone, we haven't seen much soldiers in Stepanakert because they were all at the front line, on the front line. But the people who stayed, women, children, or people helping, people who were really helpful and useful for the city, they stayed there, and the mood was high, and there was a huge movement of solidarity between people. They were giving free food to everyone, even to us journalists, because we were covering, and they were telling us that we are part of this war, in the sense that we help in some way, covering the information and giving updates about the situation. Inhabitants, there were a lot of people who were in the shelters, scared, worried. Not that scared as worried. They're really worried about the situation, because all of them have a relative, a brother, an uncle, a husband, a boyfriend who's fighting on the front line, and they were just thinking about them. And most of the people were really brave. Like the way they were trying to stay calm, not to succumb to panic, it was remarkable. It shows that those people, in some way, the people who are living there, they are in some way, they've been always ready for this kind of scenario. Although they said that they would never think that something like this would happen, that they would attack civilians and the cities and the villages. This was a scenario that no one was really ready for, and not with this intensity.
You and many in Artsakh experienced air raids, as you just mentioned, an artillery bombardment. This and the videos of it, I have to say, still remain quite alien to people who are far from Artsakh. Can you describe these air raids and their toll and how, in a way, this is a tactic of terrorizing peaceful inhabitants and citizens?
Look, there is, besides the fact that the concrete consequences that it has on people when they are injured or because they hit and then you die, besides that, there is also this psychological impact on you, and I can tell because I was there, and the psychological impact on me and also on my colleagues was huge. So at a certain point, they were hitting with drones, with Smerch and Grads, and I guess other things that I'm not aware of, and I'm not informed enough to know what they were using exactly. But those are the three things that we were experiencing so far. At a certain point, we could even make the difference between a drone and a Smerch. I cannot make the difference of the sound of a Grad and a Smerch, for example, but I can make the difference between a drone or a Smerch in terms of sound, okay, because it doesn't sound the same way. This is what they were using, and it was. Why was it escalating every day? It's because they were just bombing once, twice in Stepanakert, but the last days when we stayed, they were constantly bombing, and they were using Smerches, and it was hitting not once but like 6 times in the same area, and it was coming closer. So they were really targeting an area and trying to destroy what was in the area. It wasn't like it sounded to me that they weren't like targeting a special place and that's it, and they're living after hitting. It was they are trying to destroy everything they can in this area. This is how it sounded when we were in the shelters, because the last day when we stayed for 6 hours, this is the feeling we had. Like it wasn't just like one hitting and that's it, but like 6 times at a row. And it was coming closer to us. So I guess they were really trying to target this area and hit, and to destroy whatever was in the surrounding.
Was the shelter you were in the center of Stepanakert?
It was in Stepanakert. I cannot tell where it was, but it was not the outskirts of Stepanakert. It was more or less the center. And it was really close to us the last days.
And in terms of, like you say, information, how did Artsakh authorities and in general the Armenian authorities allow journalists to operate freely while at the same time securing national security interests?
So at first we were pretty free to cover whatever we wanted, be in Stepanakert or in the villages. But at a certain point, when the escalation day by day, when it was escalating day by day, they started to limit our movement, not the movement much as the footages or our work, because of the security. So they weren't allowing us to have large footages of places or filming people, because they were considering that might give information to Azerbaijan. So at a certain point we were stuck and we couldn't do our work. So that's why we decided to go back to Goris at a certain point. So the international, since the conflict was covered very late by international media, they came also very late compared to us locals. So when they came, actually the limitations for them was already set. So when they came, they claimed that this is unfair because they came to cover a war and it was a good thing for us in some way. They were saying, how do you want people to know about the situation if you don't let us to cover it, if you don't let us take footages and show it? So I understand international media in that sense, and it's true. But I understand also what the government says and the decision of the government, because it was also about security. And I guess if they say that, they know what they're talking about. Our colleagues, my colleagues who stayed there, they're still there. They had the opportunity to go in other places in Shushi when the church was bombed. I mean, you can move there as a journalist, but you have no insurance that anyone would protect you, because it became a real war zone. It was, but it became even worse now. So no one's going to protect you as a journalist there. If you wait for this, if you wait for a body, an official body to protect you, I don't think it's going to work. You're going to be limited, or you have to take the risk and go by your own and try to take as much as footages as you can, being aware that you have to be careful with the footages you use so that you don't give information for the adversary, to the adversary.
Well, you mentioned you went back to Goris, and Goris is the main thoroughfare between Nagorno Karabakh and Armenia. What's the situation in Goris like?
So in Goris, you know that they also attacked the entrance. So it's the Lachin, the entrance between Armenia and to Artsakh. So they bombed it. So people are scared because they think that if they could come so far, they might also reach Goris, which is the largest city near the border with Karabakh. So people are scared, but for many reasons. First, because they provide help in some way to Karabakh. In some way, they support. I mean, Armenia is supporting Karabakh, obviously. It's a secret for no one. So they're scared because they're really close to the border because of this reason, and they fear that they might also strike Goris. They avoid talking to journalists because of this. They are also how would I describe this? Their mood is very low. The spirit is low because, I mean, they know that they have to fight and all that, but they have also children, 18-year-old boys, who were sent to Artsakh to fight. So they're worried about them. They're just waiting for some news and everything. So there is this kind of forced motivation, but depression at the same time. So it's a changing mood all the time. They're worried, which is normal. They're scared, but they still think that we should continue and fight because we have no other choice. This is what they say.
Are you willing to go back to cover the war in Artsakh?
I really want to because I don't think that my job is done there. I don't want to go back because for myself or I don't know, for an ego or whatever. I just want to go back because I think that my duty and my work as a journalist is not finished yet there, and there's still things to say and to show, and we need people to know what is happening here because I really, and no one wants this area becomes a war zone as Syria, as Afghanistan or other places where Armenia would be remembered as a place that is just a testimony of a war, a new testimony of a war. So I want people to understand, be aware of what is happening here because it's not a war between Armenia in the region of Karabakh against Azerbaijan. It's way much more than this. It might take such a big proportion that it might also reach countries such as Iran, Turkey for sure, Russia, and it might also spread. So that's why it needs to be stopped, and we need as journalists to continue to show, so everyone should go. I know it's hard, I know it's dangerous, I know you risk your life, but it's for the sake of humanity, it's not for the sake of Armenians. We're not covering for the sake of a nation only, but it's a step forward to avoid again those kind of wars. This is our job, just to show so that it doesn't happen, and one day hopefully it will not happen ever again. So that's why I want to be there, just to show to the humanity that other humans are dying.
Ani, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.